Welcome back, everybody, to Tea Time. I'm your host, James Hutchison. We're really excited to be out on the golf course today. It's a beautiful day. It's our first men's day, actually, so we're out here amidst the golfers. And we've got another special guest for you today. I'm here with my co-host, Adrienne, and we've got joining us Claire Welsh from Golf Canada. She's the tournament director for the CPKC Women's Open that's coming up in August. So we're really excited to talk to her, ask her some questions about the tournament, and get to know her a little bit. Thanks for joining us, Claire.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great to be with you.
Yeah, we're really excited. Maybe just first you can just tell us about your career and how you came to be the tournament director and all that fun jazz.
Absolutely. So I'm about 3 months back in Canada after living in St. Andrews in Scotland for the past 11 years. It's been wonderful to join Golf Canada after working at the RNA for about a decade. When I worked at the RNA, I had a number of different roles. I worked most recently as head of player relations for the Open Championship and the AIG Women's Open. Before that, I worked on the marketing side, managing social media for the Open Championship, and before that, I worked in communications for the RNA. So it was just a real adventure and a real privilege to have had that experience. Before that, I worked with our friends over at Golf Ontario under Kyle McFarlane. At that time, I watched Brooke Henderson as she was sort of coming up as a junior golfer.
Nice.
So
Awesome.
it feels
so cool.
really full circle
Yeah.
to be sitting here today and now seeing her, going from dominating like junior girls golf to now winning majors, winning the CPKC Women's Open. Like it just, I'm full of pride and admiration for Brooke. Before that I was a sports writer, so my background is sort of in journalism. As I said, it's just been really wonderful to join the team at Golf Canada and see what a great place that golf is in here in Canada.
Nice. That's cool. I definitely want to dig into some of the stuff that you experienced over in Scotland because, I think that's obviously like a very rich history over there and maybe some of the differences that happen over there versus here in our golf world.
Yeah. I think it's really awesome, like being a female in the industry and just hearing about Brooke and like your experience and like watching her grow and make a huge impact on golf for women is just unreal. And now that we're having the event here, it just makes it, like you say, like full circle, just having it come back and really inspiring our junior girls here just to show them like everybody has a chance, right? Like no matter your skill level, like you're in it and really enjoy it no matter what, right? So it's just really nice to hear.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And just kind of going off of that, what excites you most about the opportunity to run such a prestigious event here, like the CPKC Women's Open?
Yeah, it's really exciting. The CPKC Women's Open is held in such high regard, not just by the players, but I mean, it was 2-time Tournament of the Year in 22 and 23.
Right.
And when I worked at the RNA and we took over responsibility for the AIG Women's Open, I did a bit of a survey program, speaking to players and trying to understand, who does it best? Where do you like playing? Where are you treated the best? And the CPKC Women's Open came up over and over again, which again sort of filled me with pride as a Canadian. But I also knew that like when this opportunity came up, I was stepping into an event that was already in a really, really good place. Ryan Paul, my colleague, who's now the tournament director of the RBC Canadian Open, he took this event to new heights. Yeah. So the bar is already really high, and it's just really exciting to kind of see where we go from here, particularly with this huge momentum in women's sports right now.
Yeah,
Nice.
That's awesome. It's great. So you spent a decade over at the RNA, working on global championships like the Open, the AIG Women's Open. What are the most valuable lessons and moments you kind of took away from that?
Yeah, it was a real adventure, and I had the privilege of traveling the world and seeing golf from so many different angles. And I think that gaining that perspective about what the game looks like globally, I think just stands me in really good stead to be able to understand how to navigate things, particularly, something with as big a platform as the CPKC Women's Open.
Right.
I think, again, one of those lessons that I've really been reflecting on now that I'm back in Canada, as I mentioned earlier, is just seeing like how good of a place golf is in right here in Canada, how well run it is, how engaged golfers are, how much people care about golf. And I am biased, but I do feel like Canada does it best in terms of
sure.
the way that we deliver, high performance programs and like seeing those pathways for all different levels of golf.
Yeah.
So I think that's certainly been something that I've learned. I think on the, something people always ask me, I think personally coming from the player relations side is, about people want to know the gossip. They want to know like what player was your favorite, who was a nightmare, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I think spending time up close with players who are, your heroes, I'll say it, I was able to spend meaningful time with people like Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, Jack Nicklaus, Annika Sorenstam, all of these incredible people that I grew up kind of, watching and idolizing. And I think, my takeaway from that too is that, people are just people.
Yep.
And it's been fascinating to just kind of learn about how people follow that pathway to become the absolute best in the world. And I think that, again, that kind of puts me in a nice position to, be able to encourage those up and coming golfers to, help them reach those heights as well.
Yeah.
For sure. That's awesome.
Nice. It is cool too, like when you said you were at the Open or the Women's Open and they were bringing up the CPK or the CPKC as their favorite tournament, right?
Yes,
Like,
that's
I'm
right.
assuming unprompted by you, right? Maybe they knew you were Canadian, but like.
No, and the survey work we did was actually anonymous.
Oh,
so
okay.
there was
You-
no,
that's-
I had
yeah.
some follow-up conversations with people, and I think people probably assumed I was American with my accent
Maybe.
or whatever. But no, it was unprompted, and I think people really talked about how friendly and welcoming the atmosphere is every year, no matter where we go across the country. It's one of the nice things about the CPKC Women's Open is that it is Canada's National Women's Open. It's the only LPGA Tour stop north of the border. And, we go from coast to coast to lots of different iconic, prestigious courses. So, it really is a great showcase of Canadian golf at its finest.
Yeah, beautiful. So I want to talk a bit about like week of the event. Obviously you've been around the players a lot, and this is
Yeah.
like, as a coach, I'm always curious to get people's perspective on like what do the players do the week of, how do they prepare for the event. Obviously you see it up close and personal.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just speak a little bit to like some of their habits, whether they're all kind of doing the same thing or do people have very distinct kind of pre-tournament weeks. Like how do they get ready for that tournament?
Yeah, I love this question, and I love seeing all the different ways that players prepare and practice. And I think like there is no sort of blanket answer. Like people would always ask me like, what do the players want? What do the players need? And it's an individual sport, and everybody's so
Right,
different.
yeah.
For sure.
So I think, it totally varies. Some people are very sort of relaxed and just sort of like go on vibes and how they feel that day, whereas other people are much more methodical. And I think that probably one of the things that I think is important is just making sure that, when players come to an event, that they have a level of sort of protection, a level of headspace to be able to focus on what it is that they're there to do, which
Yeah.
is to perform at their very best and to win and to get paid, right? And I think you can really see, when you see it from the inside, you can see how much players can be pulled in all sorts of different directions in terms of, come do some media, we need a sponsor thing, film a quick thing for social, we need you over here, all these
Yeah,
sorts
yeah,
of things
yeah.
that I think particularly for the women, they're incredibly generous with their time when it comes to like doing that sort of thing. But I do think it is really important to make sure that, you're just sort of like, you can ring fence those opportunities for them to do something else, but really their focus should be on getting ready to compete. So that is something that's pretty important to me in making sure that we do that for the players.
Nice.
awesome.
So yeah, what about someone like Brooke, who this is her home country
Yeah.
event, right? Are her time pressures like insane? Like you hear about it, but like what does that look like for her? How does she kind of manage and navigate that getting ready for an event like this?
Yeah, I think, if you've been to a CPKC Women's Open or you've even seen Brooke play anywhere, there is just like massive crowds, massive
Yeah.
galleries,
Always
Canadian
following her.
fans,
Yeah,
like people
yeah.
in hockey jerseys, it's just incredible to see. But
Yeah.
I think you do really reflect on like all that added pressure that is put onto her shoulders when she is playing, particularly in front of like, call it a hometown crowd here in Canada.
Yeah.
And, maybe adjacent to that, maybe not necessarily all about Brooke, but I think when I was managing the social media for the Open Championship, it was really interesting because you'd put something out into the world and you'd receive instant feedback. And, I think when you're managing a brand, you're not necessarily like taking that personally if you're seeing things that are negative. But one thing I've really seen, from the player perspective when I moved into the player relations space is that when it comes to social media, like you can't escape it. Even if you're not on your own accounts or whatever, there's just this like ongoing sort of barrage of feedback to you and your performance and being on TV and all that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of seeing the toll that can take on an athlete's mental health with all of that sort of like additional exposure. I can't really I reflect on it all the time. I just think about like what sort of impact that may have. So I think Brooke, like in knowing her, she's pretty good at sort of like protecting her space and going forward and knowing what she wants, which I really, really admire. But, I think that when you see athletes deal with all of that additional pressure, you can only think it must be really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much pressure, right? Like you say, just because it's her hometown, right? So everyone has like such high expectations, and everyone just wants to be around her and like get to know her, right? So everyone's just like swarming her, and I've obviously seen through social media how she's very kind and welcoming to, everyone, but to junior girls, like there's just something there for them, right? To look up to. She's really
too like. Sorry,
it's okay. It's
cut
really
you
just
off,
kind,
but like
yeah.
just kind of thought of this like. Talking about social media, you can't really have an off moment, right? If you have an off moment, it's on camera, and now it's all over the internet, right?
Right.
And I'm sure, like, everyone's human. They have moments where they're just like, oh, I don't want to do this, right?
Yeah.
But, like, you got to be really strong mentally to just give everyone your time and give everyone the same level of treatment, right? Like, it's got to be hard.
Absolutely. And to your point, I think Brooke is just the most wonderful ambassador for Canadian golf, for Canadian sport. She's Canada's most successful ever golfer. I think it's just like you want to shout that from the rooftops. It's such an achievement. I think like, again, it's a privilege to be able to work with her and see her representing our event.
That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, so just talking about, women and females in the industry or even in sports in general, like we see how there's such a gain over the years. Like we have the PWHL, the WNBA, like we're just making so many changes. From your point, what's the driving momentum in women's golf, and how do you see events like the CPKC affecting that?
Yeah, it is such an exciting time to work in women's sports. I would say that one of the things that I really notice is that even just in the last maybe 5 years, there was for a really long time a real sort of normalization of some of the sexist phrases you would hear when people were talking about women's golf or women's sport. They're not as good, or they don't hit it as far, or they're too slow. All of these things that are not true, but that unfortunately were sort of like pervasive. And seeing the shift now across golf, across women's sports, where you can't say that anymore. You never should have been able to, but now we just see that like when you go to a PWHL game, as you mentioned, and you see like the next generation, you see young girls, their default is to expect gender equity, not for men's sport to be the default and women's is just off to the side now. It's seeing, yeah, exactly. It's like finding that sort of level playing field. So I think it's just been, in this market in particular, amazing to see this like incredible influx of money into women's sport. And, again, these sort of comments around, there's no business case for it, or they don't generate as much revenue, again, that's not true either, right? We're seeing, the ratings, the ticket sales, people investing incredible amounts of money into women's sport. And it's just, again, so encouraging to be able to see. I think, maybe one of the challenges, interestingly, for golf is that, golf is actually one of the sort of like OG women's sports. Like the LPGA really sort of like set a marker, fought really hard to bring down those barriers and, benchmarked things like maternity leave and, childcare, things like that help women's athletes be able to perform at their best. And I think that, golf needs to make sure, this will be a challenge for the incoming LPGA commissioner, whoever that is that, we don't get swept away by that momentum, that we stay at the forefront of women's sports because we've been there for so long. Right. But it's a great problem to have, right? Is that, now we're not just, the comparison is no longer just like men's golf to women's golf. It's now like women's sport. We can be looking at ratings across all the different women's sports. So it's awesome.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So how is this tournament specifically, like, it's your first tournament coming up in August, right? Do you have plans to kind of make any changes, or I guess just kind of what's the vision for the next 3 to 5 years with this tournament? Is it kind of just status quo and just around the fringes try to make it better, or is there any overarching changes you'd like to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I said, the event is already in such a good place, right?
Yeah.
You know, we hear players say all the time. I was at the Chevron last week, or 2 weeks ago, which is a major, you know, when I was asking for feedback from players about the CPKC, they were saying, well, you know what, that event feels like a major as well, which is super encouraging. This will be my first go around, kind of seeing it from, you know, behind the scenes.
Right.
And, you know, there may be things that sort of come out of that, but from where I sit right now, again, like the team that does this event, delivers this event, are among the best I've ever encountered in golf. Incredibly talented. And, you know, so I think that, you know, we'll see. Ask me again in a year maybe,
Okay.
but, you know,
Yeah.
I think probably one of the things, and Mississauga is a really good example of that, is that there's definitely a sentiment around the, you know, you hear from the players saying, you know, we want to play where the men play. We want to play those iconic major championship caliber golf courses, which, you know, Mississauga will certainly fall into that category. So I think as we look forward to the next 3 to 5 years, it would just be sort of continuing that trend. Canada has so many fabulous golf courses.
Yeah.
So I think continuing to make sure that we're taking it to like the very best places, giving players those opportunities.
Are the venues like? Do you try to go in any kind of order across the country, or is it just kind of mixed up with however it shakes out?
It's a great question. I mean, our title sponsor, CPKC, is a road company linking the country. So there is that sort of ambition to be able to move, you know, from east to west.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just sort of take it in turn and look at each year and where makes the most sense. And, you know, as you know, it's a lot for a club to take on an event of this scale. It is disruptive. And so, you know, when we have clubs that are willing to come to the table, you know, we're very grateful that they're willing to like give up their course and go through all of that. So, you know, we're excited to, you know, see where we go next.
Cool. Yeah, I know our members, like when we first started talking about it, a lot of people were excited. And then there were, you know, obviously some people who were trepidatious, but like I think now that it's coming and it's like it's a real thing and we're doing things like this and you know they see the Golf Canada people out at the club, like I think everyone's kind of getting excited now. So
I feel it. Like I think, you know, now you see the club come to life, right? And everybody's out and they're playing and they're exciting. And my personal experience is people have been so friendly and so welcoming and definitely not hesitant to come over and ask me questions, and you know, and I love that. So I would say too, like I definitely encourage that, and I love hearing the feedback, and again, just expressing my gratitude to the members for taking this on.
Yes, we do have a good membership.
Yeah,
We do.
definitely.
Very kind, for sure. Is there anything that you could point out that is uniquely Canadian about this event? Like, you know, the hockey rink or like where the fans are going to be based, or any other insights that you have?
Yeah, like again, another thing probably about leaving Canada and coming back is like you realize like how Canadian we all are. Like sometimes we are just stereotypes, like,
We
right?
are.
And I think like the rink hole is just the coolest thing. I mean, doing it at the CPKC and at our men's event, the RBC, and you know, it's been honored. People talk about it. I hear it mentioned constantly. You know, seeing people banging on the boards and just, you know, real that pull through of like the most Canadian iconic sort of like vibe.
Do you want to maybe just, if people don't know what the rink hole is, do you want to explain what that is?
So I mean, basically there's a hole that is chosen every year where it is fitted out like a hockey rink is probably the best way that I would describe it. So you see like the marshals and people in the hole in like referees jerseys. The players when they come will put on a hockey jersey to play the hole. You know, there's that encouragement of literally like bang on the boards. There's hospitality all around, so it's just got this like really exciting vibe. And it's such a creative, like just again fun, cool way to showcase, you know, our national sports. So one of our national sports. I'd say the other thing that has definitely sat with me is that when, you know, just going back to talking to players about how they feel about the event, talking to fans and spectators about how they feel about the event, a lot of discussion around you know, just how friendly, welcoming, encouraging, knowledgeable, you know, all of the fans are. And again, those sort of like Canadian values where you just think like we're showing up.
We're just so nice.
Yeah, we're so nice. We're representing our country the best possible way. We know when people come and visit, like, you know, hearing international players, international fans say like, I come and I just had the most Canadian time. And you just think, how
Love
cool
that.
is that, right? So, yes.
Yeah.
It just kind of pulls away from you know, events in the States or in Europe, right? Like we have our own like structure.
Yes,
you know,
identity.
you know it's exactly.
You know you're in Canada,
you know
right?
it's Canadian.
Same
love it.
accent, but you know where you are in the world.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like,
You might hear A a couple times.
Yeah.
But
I
we
get
don't
pulled
even
up on my
realize.
out and about, which I still.
I don't
it's
hear
not-
it. I can't hear the difference, but like
Yeah.
apparently we say out weird.
Yeah.
And my old roommate was from Rhode Island, and he said I said bag weird, like
Bag?
B-A-G, bag.
Bag.
He would
Okay.
always make fun of me for that, and I'm like, I don't hear it,
I
but
don't hear
okay. Yeah.
No,
Interesting.
it's funny. I found myself and my husband. We found it took 3 years for some reason. All of a sudden, after 3 years coming back to Canada, we could hear the Canadian accent. We could
Yeah.
right away pull it out. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so that's what I sound like.
you sound
right?
like,
It's
yeah.
like that self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like, I do have a very Canadian accent.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It's okay. We can lean into it. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, we can. It's fine.
Good.
So just going a different route here, it's a more personal question. What advice would you give to your younger self or to young women hoping to follow in your footsteps in the career path or sport management or golf management career that you kind of chose in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, so this year's the 75th anniversary of the LPGA, so I think I've been reflecting a lot on sort of the founders, the pioneers of women's golf, and when you hear some of the stories of the stuff that they had to deal with, the barriers they had to overcome just to have opportunities to play, to have a voice, to compete, you know, everything they had to endure, I just really think about like all the women that came before me and the foundation that they laid. You know, they crawled and walked so we can run. And I think that kind of I like to think about leading with that same principle and leaving things better than I found them, and you know, acting as a role model for the women that come before me. And it doesn't have to be like the next generation. You know, I think about women who worked, you know, 10, 20, you know, 30 years before me, you know, seeing again the things that they've had to deal with in order to be successful. And it's really encouraging to see, you know, the next generation, younger women sort of coming up and seeing some of the barriers removed. Not all of them. There's still, you know, a ways to go before we're at a full sprint.
Yep.
But, you know, I think just kind of that would be my advice is even if you lose focus or you're not sure where you're going, if you can kind of lead with that principle to say like, you know, how can I show up so that the next generation is in a better place than I am? And that's what brought me here to the Women's Open, is knowing that it was really going to be that opportunity to, again, hopefully leave things better than I found them.
That's awesome. I think everyone needs to hear that regardless of age, gender, identity, anything like that. Like, no matter who you are or your values or anything, like if you stick to what you know and you really have a passion for it, like you can do it 100%. And like I said, everybody needs to hear that, and it's really nice coming from you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we're kind of out of formal questions. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, like, again, we're really excited for the event. One of the things I'm most excited about is to just have my students like up close and personal with these athletes, because like
Yeah.
it is like I think I said it on when we talked with Leslie Byers, but like
Yeah.
our access to these athletes will never be closer for our membership and for me
Yeah.
personally, right? So I think it's such a great opportunity. So if you are kind of on the fence about, like, if you're a member and you're like, well, maybe I'll go away that week or go play golf somewhere else, like, I think do your best to be here, like, soak it in, because
Yeah.
like these are literally the best golfers in the world coming here, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So
It's
like,
a milestone.
yeah, like
It's something you want to be here
I
for.
think if you go away during this week, you probably regret it, right? Based
sure.
on
Totally agree.
yeah. So I think it fits
Awesome.
in nicely with the schedule, right? Like
does.
they're coming back from Europe a couple weeks before that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, you know, I think for the women, you know, sometimes there's barriers in place in terms of like how difficult it is to travel, how expensive it is.
Sure.
And so, yeah, when you fall somewhere in the schedule, you know, we're outside of an Olympic year, and you know, they're coming from Portland the week before and then heading to Boston the week after. I think being like in Mississauga is also a huge advantage. It's so easy. You can get anywhere from
Yes.
like
Yes.
the airport, right? So that just makes everything a lot easier. You know, we've had members come to the table to open up their homes to like billet players, which has been great. So it's
Yeah.
like another way that, you know, people can be connecting and really like getting that real like behind the scenes look at what life on tour is really like. So yeah, I think, you know, this is pretty much ideal for us in terms of like logistics and for the players, lots of accommodation, you know, nearby. So it's going to be great.
Amazing. Okay.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah,
again
thank
for
you,
being
Claire.
here.
Yeah, thank
Really
you.
appreciate your time. Glad we could do this outside. Apologies if the audio got a little funky. I know it got a little bit windy here.
Yeah.
So thank you for bearing with us with maybe, hopefully no audio issues, but
Yes.
I'm assuming a little bit of wind will get in there. And thank you to the membership and anyone else who's listening or watching on YouTube. Yeah, we're very excited for the Open. We're also very excited for the golf season. It's early May still, so
Yeah.
I've only played 9 holes. I think you've played maybe 2 9s or something like that.
An 18 and a 9.
18 and a 9. There you
We're
go.
out there.
You're ahead of the game.
I am, yeah.
So we're gonna be out on the golf course. I hope everybody else gets on the golf course too.
Yeah.
And we will be back in a couple weeks with another episode of Tea Time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.